What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and welcome to another episode of the Plastic Podcast. So, I realize some of you might be wondering, what about the Chelsea Wolves game? Are you going to talk about that? Well, to be perfectly honest, when I watched the game, I was not in a place where I could review it, and now it's been a full day since I've seen it, and I don't really remember it well enough to give a good review. But I could just give you my quick thoughts real quick because I do remember how I felt about the game. I thought we played good, not great, but I thought we played good. Wolves didn't really challenge us, test us. So I felt like we were a little bit lucky in that sense. I felt like if Wolves had come to play and if they had put in a very solid performance, we would have probably had a little bit more trouble. But they just didn't really do a whole lot to test us. Um, Pretty much all the players I felt played okay. But on that, I will say I was a little disappointed that Pulisic didn't affect the game a bit more. I didn't think Alonso played that well. I thought he was probably the weak link out of the team. Everybody else was just kind of either they were okay, they did well, or they just weren't really involved. Like Willie didn't have much to do. The defense didn't have a whole lot to do. So it's hard to really give a rating to the defense whenever they weren't tested a whole lot. But overall, it was good to get the win. But like I said, I just don't think Wolves really tested us like they could have and would have actually required a better performance from us. But anyways, the reason I wanted to do this video, I realize we still have the FA Cup game, the final on the horizon. It's fantastic that we're in the FA Cup final. But I kind of wanted to talk about the season, give my thoughts in general about, our performances, the players, all that type of stuff. So first of all, I do want to talk about Frank. First season as a manager for us. And considering he's a young manager, he's still like very new to the manager game. I thought this was a very good first season. I mean, people have been talking about it, but when you really think about it, first of all, nobody gave him a chance. Everybody was like, hey, Chelsea, they'll be in and around the top four, but I don't think they'll make top four. You have your best player in Hazard leaving. You've got no transfers in the first. And honestly, we could make transfers in January, but we still didn't. He's still stuck with the team that he started the season with. Like I said, he's a fairly new manager. I mean, yeah, I'm very, very impressed with how his first season has gone. You compare it to Sorry last season. Yeah, we finished top three. We, won the Europa League. So, you could say, oh, well, Sorry's first season wasn't that bad either. But the difference is how it feels going forward. With Sorry, it felt like a lot of his success rested on the fact that we still had Hazard and Hazard could still change a game, but it didn't feel like the manager and the players were working together. It felt like Sarri was trying to impose and his ideas, his system onto a team that wasn't really fitting it. And if not for the fact that we did have Hazard and he was able to change some games and produce that moment of magic, I don't think we would have had as good of a season. So I feel like the difference between Frank's first season and Sarri's first season is not necessarily our fit where we finished in the table and the trophies we had at the end of the season. I really think it's just how the team feels going forward. I'm much more excited to see where Frank is going to take this team, and obviously the fact that we've got some transfers coming in is also very helpful. But I look at this team and I look at what Frank has done with a team that honestly nobody really gave a chance for top four. I look at that and think, I think he's done well. And now that we can bring in players that are even better than the players we have now, and Frank can sort of get a team together that he wants instead of just taking these players that, yeah, he knows some of them, but most of them are not players he brought into the club. I don't know. I'm excited to see what he's going to do from here. But I will say, if there's one thing that I do think Frank needs to work on going forward, it's just the, I guess, the decision making and when to, I guess, be a bit more harsh on players. Because it did feel like, and he did make some big decisions. David Luiz gone at the beginning of the season. He did drop Kepa quite a few times, including for the final game of the season after his horror show against Liverpool. So he did make some difficult decisions, but there's some players that I do feel like he almost sees them as a pet project. You look at Barkley, Mason Mount at times. You look at Tammy Abraham. They're all younger. Obviously, Barkley's a bit older now, but they're all younger English players, and I think he sees that and wants to try to grow them and wants to, let's get them to be the players that everybody thinks they can be and all that. But there are times whenever you got to look at it and say, you know what, you're not performing. I got to drop you. And with Barkley, he did drop him toward the end of the season. But there were a lot of times throughout the season that I felt like he was giving Barkley a chance to prove himself and trying to give him game time to prove himself, but he wasn't. But he kept sticking with him because it's like, well, you want to try to build his confidence by giving him game time and maybe that'll improve his play, but it didn't. And that's when you have to make the hard decision to say, you know what, you're just not cutting it right now. And sometimes that in and of itself can like bump up their work rate. I will say, Tammy, when we came back from the break, he was not performing well. He was not really giving it all of his work and his effort. So Frank gave him a couple games. He didn't go out and perform, and then Frank drops him. And Giroud is our starting striker through most of this break. And I will say, near the end, Abraham looks more like the striker we had earlier in the season. He looks more energetic. He looks more lively and trying to work for the team instead of just working for himself, like we saw in the few performances like West Ham, what was the other one? Sheffield. The games where we needed a striker and he just wasn't there for us. So, but yeah, I do think though overall I'm very happy with Frank. I'm happy with how he's led the team this season. I'm really impressed considering all the hardships and all the difficult things he had to go through as a new manager too. I'm very impressed, and I can't wait to see where this team goes going forward. As far as the performances overall, obviously we had some really great performances. We had some great games to look back on and think that was a fantastic performance. Obviously beating Man City. Did we do the double on them? I think we beat them earlier in the season. But, just the performances over Arsenal, the performances over Man City, obviously, with Man U, they were kind of our bogey team. We lost twice in the league, lost in the League Cup, but then the performance in the FA Cup I thought was fantastic. The performances over Tottenham, people kept saying, oh, the student has now become the master because he completely just destroyed Jose Mourinho's tactics. So, yeah, I thought there were some really great performances to look back on, but also there were some that I feel like at the end of the season, I'm now a little disappointed that we are going into next season having to do a playoff to get into the Champions League because we really should have been third. There's no reason why Man U should have overtaken us because we had, thankfully Man U and Leicester also dropped some points or else we wouldn't even be in the top four because we definitely gave them a chance to come back at us. There were some very poor performances, and honestly, it comes down to a lot of them came against teams that were out of form. And I think that's kind of an issue going forward, is that whenever we face teams that are out of form, that aren't really confident, they're going to sit back more and just sort of pack it in and then wait. We've always had a problem as a club for the most part. We've had a problem whenever teams do that because we don't really have a way to break them down. We don't have the same type of players. We don't have like a Costa or a Drogba that's willing to bump some defenders around and open up spaces. We don't have Hazard anymore that can take on 3 or 4 defenders when they're all packing it in. We have a lot of good players, but you look at Pulisic, he needs space to run. His best performances came against teams where they open up, they're expansive, and then he's able to have room to run at them and cause problems. That's when he's at his best. But whenever, looking at Wolves, whenever they're packed in and he doesn't have space to run, he doesn't really have anything to show yet. And he could grow into that and eventually become that player that even when they pack it in, he could still take them on. But right now, that's not where he is. Giroud, great player, but if he doesn't have space for the players around him, he doesn't have anybody to lay it off to. If there are 3 players surrounding him, his layoffs now become he's settling it for the defender. You look at Willian, he's also a player, he's got great pace, but if they're packed in, where's he going to go with that pace? And even, Mason Mount, you look at Hudson-Odoi, even Pedro. Not many of them. Pedro, I think, is probably the closest player we have to somebody that can work in tight spaces and make quick plays. So hopefully, with some of these talented players we're bringing in for next season, we can look to try to affect that a bit more, because I really do think that's our biggest problem right now is we just don't have those players anymore that can affect a game whenever the other team has packed it in. Because it's one thing to just continually go at a team, but if you're not creating chances from going at them, then you're not really doing much. And it's very comfortable for them to just sit in and defend and then boot it up to their fast striker, and all of a sudden now they can counter on you. And that was our issue for a few of the games this season against teams that packed it in. So, but yeah, overall though, I am happy with the fourth place finish. I am happy that we are in the top four. If you told me we were making top four at the beginning of the season, I would have been very excited for that. But yeah, definitely by the end of the season, seeing our performances, it was a little disappointing to end up fourth instead of third. So that's something definitely to improve on going forward. As far as players and individuals this season, I really do think this was a great season to show that you don't need superstars to do well. You need a good, solid team, because for the most part, our performances were put together by good team performances. It was never one guy just outshone everybody else and he just completely took it to him. There were a couple games where it was, like Willian, couple free kicks put us in the lead. And then after that, it was just kind of like an okay team performance. But that very rarely happened. Most of the time, if we performed well, it's because the team worked together and we really took it to them. Everybody, everybody doing it. So I will go ahead and just preface it with that. Like, I really do think this year we didn't have anybody that completely outshone everyone. It was very much this is the team working together. This is everybody coming together because we don't have any superstars anymore, except for Conte, but he was out for a lot of the season. But because of that, we need everybody working together and busting it together, so that way, we don't get outclassed. But I will say a couple of players that for me really, really impressed this season. I do think Pulisic did well for most of it. I do think he's got some growing to do, but he had some games that showed, hey, this is the type of player we're getting. And thankfully, I would say it was just over half, because there were some performances where he did look like he was not really able to do much. It was mainly, like I said, against the teams that just packed it in. So if he can change his game to affect it more whenever that's going on, whenever a team does pack it in, I think he could become very good replacement for Hazard. But I really do think, because it's his first season in the Premier League, because it is a different league compared to where he was before, Bundesliga, I do think it was a good season for him. I think it really helped his confidence to have so many good games. So going forward, like I said, I do want to see more in the games whenever teams pack it in, because that's when we need him even more. But right now, knowing that we have a player that can take on a defense when he's got the room to is very exciting. And it makes me excited to see us going forward, because, when we play teams like Liverpool or like Man City, it makes me excited to know that we have a player that can get at them and can cause trouble for their defense. I really thought Giroud, very underappreciated player. And I think more and more people are recognizing now why he's such a good striker. Because honestly, he is a striker that works for the team. He's not a striker that's all in it. Costa and Drogba, they helped us going forward. But also they were just good strikers that like to score. Giroud, he likes to score too, of course, but you really see his best performances whenever he's laying it off or getting assists or, putting pressure on the defense, which opens up space for another player to run in behind him. Those, in my opinion, are his best performances. And it's very rare to find a striker that really helps the team around him, not just himself. And that's what I do think I want to see a bit more from Abraham, because I do think Abraham is a good striker for himself. He makes great runs. He looks to get into spaces very well. But now I want to see him doing a bit more to help the players around him. Make runs that open up space for somebody else to make the run in. Or put pressure on the defense. You may not necessarily win the ball, but now they miss the ball and it goes in behind for somebody else. I don't see enough of that from him. But I do, going back to Giroud, I think that really showed out this season because, like I said, it was more of a team season than it was an individual season. And Giroud's the player for that. And he had a lot of great performances. He had a lot of good goals, too. So I was really impressed to see that from him. And I do think going forward, he's going to be a good player to have. Even though we are getting in some better attacking players, I still think he's a great player to have to throw in. He can make the players around him better. He can open up space for him. So definitely great to see. From Tammy and Mason, I will say both of them, they have growing to do. And I'll throw Reese in there as well. Like, they all three have growing to do, but I was very impressed seeing their first, true season in the Chelsea colors. Because all three of them, I thought, had a lot of different elements that they brought to the game. Like I said, Tammy, great striker. I do think he reads the game very well. He makes some great runs. But like I said, I do want to see him add a bit more of the complete forward, helping the players around him. For Mason, I think he's got a lot of energy. He works his butt off. You can see every game he's the engine in the midfield. Whenever he picks up the ball, it's quick. He's turning. He's ready to go. He's also working to put pressure on the ball so we win it back quickly. The one thing I want to see him add is just a bit more technical, a bit more technique on the ball. Because there are times whenever it feels like he's on it and he's taken on a player, but then he doesn't have any ideas of what to do with it. And so sometimes he'll just dribble right into pressure, or he won't really see where he's going. And so he dribble, and then he realizes, wait, I've got no help. So just a bit more awareness and technique on the ball. I feel like if he can add that to his game, he will be a great, box-to-box type of midfielder. And then Reese, one thing he definitely brings is the attacking fullback, a great wingback role, because he has good pace and he can whip a ball in excellently. So now what we need from him is a bit more defensive cover, because there are times when he does do well defensively, but there are also times whenever he's caught out of position or he dives in a little too easily. So I definitely want to see a bit more smarter decisions defensively, because, obviously at wingback you don't have to worry about it as much, but if he's in a back four, I do worry a little bit that he's going to get caught out going down the field and then not getting back, or diving in and now all of a sudden there's all the space behind him that he's now left open. So the three of them, like I said, they had good first seasons. I want to see them improve just because it is exciting to have these three academy prospects come through, and then now they're breaking into the first team, because we can get more academy prospects that are going to say, hey, these academy people are now making it into the first team. Because I do think that's one of the things that a lot of these youth players, they come through the youth program, but they don't see any product. They don't see, oh yeah, well, this guy's performing well, but he's getting loaned out again, and he's getting loaned out again, and now he's being sold. I think that kind of turns some youth players off to wanting to come to us. So if we start to integrate these youth players and they do start to perform well, it's going to bring us even better youth players that we can use later. So I'm very excited to see that. Willian, I do think, is another underappreciated player. I think he's just such a consistent performer. I don't think he ever really has a bad game. There are times whenever he's not involved, so he's just kind of there, and he's not having a good game either, but he's just kind of on the field. There have been a couple games like that throughout the season, don't get me wrong. But for the most part, I think of him and I'm like, yeah, that was a good performance, and that was a good performance, and that was a good performance. He's just such a consistent performer, and he works hard for the team. He's willing to put in that extra work to win the ball back. He's willing to put in that extra work to work back and put pressure or defend. And that's not something you often see from attacking players. So to think that we might not sign him for another deal is very concerning for me. And I've talked about this before. I really do think he needs to be re-signed. Who cares if he wants 3 more years, and you don't normally do that for older players. He's going to be able to go for 3 more years. He's got the legs and the engine to do it. So let him do it for us. And don't let him go, because apparently rumors are he wants to stay in London. Don't let Mourinho pick him up and all of a sudden now we have to worry about Tottenham going forward, because I don't want that to happen. So I really, really hope that they can work things out and not end up with another Courtois situation where we lose a player that was solid for us and we don't have another option that can fill that role. As far as, let's see, I'm trying to think of other players that I would say had a good season. Obviously, Conte, it's hard to really judge his season because so much of it was affected by injury. I thought when he was out there, he looked okay. I think his best performances came after the break when Lampard started using him as a defensive midfielder. Shocking, right? The best defensive midfielder in the world, and when you put him in the defensive midfield role, he plays well. What? It's amazing. But yeah, I mean, sucks that he keeps getting injured. I really hope that after the FA Cup, I hope he's a fit for the FA Cup, but I hope they can really get him to rest and fully recover because we need him to be fit for next season. Um, we're getting in some better players, but defensively is where we need more solidness. Solidness? Is that a word? I'm going to say it's a word. But we do need to be more solid in the back. And of course, hopefully now they're looking at some defenders going forward. But one thing that will help us be solid is if we do go with a 4-3-3, Conte sitting deep like that will help us a whole lot. Because it frees up the other two midfielders to go more forward. But as far as Kovacic and Jorginho, I would give them both an average season. Kovacic, he is a solid player. I do think he's also very underappreciated because he works hard in the midfield. But I want to see him add more assists, more goals. Because working hard in the midfield is great and it helps out a lot. But if you're not doing anything to help us going forward, it does kind of beg the question, why are you in there? And don't get me wrong, I realize that's not everything for a midfielder. I fully appreciate everything he does whenever he's defending. But I will admit, there have been times where I'm thinking, have a shot, or we need you to get that assist. We need you to lay that pass in because we need you to do more to help out in the attack. Especially when it's a 4-3-3 that we're playing, you need those two midfielders that are ahead of the defensive midfielder to be involved in the attack and to be helping out in the attack. And there's just too many times that I felt like Kovacic wasn't really giving us anything in the final third. And so it's something he needs to add to his game because it's something we do need from him. And as far as Jorginho is concerned, like I said, I think he had an average season starting off very similar to what we had last season, the same Jorginho that I'm just thinking, why is he in there? And then I thought as the season went on, I thought he got better. I thought he started looking more and more like the player that we wanted to get whenever Sarri picked him up. But then break happens and then he comes back and he's same old Jorginho. Lack of ability defensively, giving the ball away a little too cheaply, not fast enough in the midfield, not distributing quick enough. So there definitely is an issue there. I still don't really know what to expect from him whenever he goes out. I mean, there could be a game where he's just tearing it up, great passes, opening up the play. But then there could be a game where he's not involved going forward, and then defensively he lets guys just run right past him because he's not fast enough. So really need more from him if he wants to stay in the team, because we have some decent midfielders that are already a part of the team that could easily take his spot. So defensively, this is where things get a little bit more tricky because, of course, we do know the one issue we had, especially coming back from the break, is our defense. I think a lot of people realize just how bad our defense could be whenever we came back for the break. Now, I think throughout most of the season, they weren't too bad. We had a few hiccups here and there. We had some poor performances here and there defensively. But it wasn't until we came back from the break that those weaknesses were exposed. I think Azpilicueta is definitely one that you could say is always solid. But aside from that, it's hard to look at any of the center defenders and say, yeah, they had a solid season. Because all of them definitely had games where something happened and you're just like, what are you thinking? What are you doing out there? You're supposed to be a professional. Why are you making these mistakes, especially at a high level club like Chelsea? So yeah, I'm going to start taking a step now into the not so great territory because I would definitely say, I've sung Rudiger's praises. I do think he was still unfairly treated after the West Ham game because Christensen also had just as bad of a game. But yeah, then after that, he didn't really do much to help his case. The games that he did come in afterwards, after Christensen got hurt too, didn't do much to convince me that, oh yeah, that was just a one-time mistake, like I was saying. But Christensen, I don't think is good enough. I think he's had a chance. People kept saying, oh, he's the next John Terry, he's going to be great. He's still not. Zuma decent defender, but just not enough as far as leading the team. And same for Rudiger. He's not a leader either, and Christensen's not a leader. And Tomori, he's young. I just don't see a leader back there. Espilicueta is our captain, but even he's not really a leader and organizer on the field. And that's what we need. We need somebody back there. You look at Terry, or even, I know this is going to be a weird comparison because, MLS is nowhere near the level of the Premier League, but Atlanta United, Michael Parkhurst. The one thing that has killed us this season in Atlanta is that we don't have a leader in the defense. And even though Parkhurst was not the most fantastic, athletic ability, he wasn't the best in the air, it didn't matter. He read the game well and he organized the defense for us. So whenever De Boer took him out of the defense, all of a sudden defensively now we look weak and we have no idea what's going on and people are all over each other and 6s and 7s and all that. You need a leader to organize. You need somebody back there that's going to make sure, even if they're not the best defender ever, you need somebody who's going to read the game well and who's going to organize for you. And I think that's something where Liverpool going forward are going to start to struggle a bit more because as great of a defender as Van Dijk is, it's all in his athletic ability. I don't think he is a good reader mentally of the game, and there are times when they've been caught out because of that. And I do think going forward, teams are going to start to realize that, and they're going to start to take advantage of that a bit more. And, obviously he has the athletic ability to cover it up, but that's where you do need somebody back there who can organize, who can make sure, the midfielders in front of them are covering their man. The defender that they're working with, they're marked up. They're always watching to be what's going on here, what's going on behind me. All right, there's the ball. I see what's coming in. I see that the cross is coming in and this guy's going to be making this run. I'm going to be there to stop it. It's stuff like that you just don't see much anymore, but I do think there are players out there that are like that, and we need to go find a player like that. And even if it means we have to go find a player and then get them to that level, as long as they can read the game well, I think they can be a leader. And I think we can, bring in somebody that can do that for us. So anyways, all that being said, the other players that I do want to talk about as far as the not so great seasons, I do think you got to look at Barkley for one. I know I already talked about him a little bit, but yeah, I do think he was given a lot of trust by the manager, and I don't think he earned it. I don't see enough from him. I don't see enough from him on the ball. His play is too slow. Defensively, he doesn't really work back enough to help us. So I mean, you don't want to just say, oh yeah, completely write him off, because he sucks. But at the same time, at what point do you cut the line off and just say, look, you're not good enough. You're not cutting it for us. Because, yeah, at a team like Everton, I'm sure he looked fantastic because it's Everton. But that's the thing. There are certain players, like a lot of people were talking about Jack Grealish at the beginning of the season, how Man U was looking at him and all this stuff. And even you look at Zaha for Palace. These players that they're tearing it up at these clubs like Palace or like Aston Villa. But then they're at a club like Man U, and Zaha obviously didn't cut it. Grealish, by the end of the season, Man U's not really looking at him anymore. Or if they are, they're dumb. But that's the thing, is that Barkley, I feel like, is a player like that. He's a player that at Everton, he looked fantastic. He was one of their best players. But then you go to a club like Chelsea, and now you're battling against players that are much, much better than you, and you're just not cutting it. And I feel like he's not done enough to make himself better to justify being put in the midfield over a player like Kovacic especially. So yeah, I feel like the experiment with Barkley just needs to come to an end, because honestly, I'm sick of seeing him out there on the pitch. And then you've got Alonso and Emerson. I mean, what can I say about them, really? They were not really involved by the end of the season. Yeah, we started going with the back three a couple more games near the end, and so then Alonso did become a bit more involved. But I don't think that's Lampard's favorite system. I don't think that's his ideal formation. So I don't see Alonso being useful going forward. I think we're going to look to go to a back four, and he's just not a fullback, and he's not really changed his game I've not seen enough from him defensively to think, oh yeah, now he works as a fullback. And Emerson, I mean, I don't rate him as a player. He's another player that Sarri brought in because he knew him and or no, was that Sarri? No, that was Conte. What am I saying? Conte brought him in because, it's a player I think that he knew. But he didn't bring anything. He didn't bring anything that we needed as a wingback or a fullback. He's just sort of there. He's got some pace on him, but that's about all he has. I don't think he's good enough to cut it. So hopefully going forward we can look for a left back too. And then finally, of course, probably, in my opinion, our worst player of the season, Kepa. Kepa Arrizabalaga, or like I like to call him now, Kepa Arrizabalaga, because he's rooted to the ground. He's just not good enough. He not only is he just an average keeper, but also we way overpaid for him, which makes this all the more frustrating because we didn't do our jobs. We didn't make sure we had a keeper lined up if Courtois was going to leave, and so then all of a sudden Courtois does leave, and now we are out of luck because we didn't try to make sure something was lined up, and now we just sort of panic bought a keeper that was not worth the price tag, and we've been stuck with him for 2 seasons now. And for 2 seasons, he has not been good enough. And obviously you can look to a couple of other different scenarios where he was even worse than we really needed him to be. But, in my opinion, the biggest thing is that I looked where he was last season. I look at some of the problems I had with him last season, the inability to move, the fact that he doesn't really try if he doesn't think he can get there, the fact that he doesn't command his box well enough. All of those issues are still there after 2 seasons. And you paid £71 million for him. I mean, there's an issue there. And it needs to be resolved. So either you get rid of him or you get him to improve. Because you've got trainers there that know how to get that out of players. They know how to get them to work on that. So if he's not improving, then are the trainers not doing enough, or is he not doing enough in training? Because if it's the trainers aren't doing enough, well, then we look at the coaching staff. We might make some adjustments there and see if we can bring in somebody that can get the best out of him, if we do think he can get there. But if the trainers are working with him and they're trying to get him to a level that is good enough for the Premier League, and he's just not working hard enough to get there, or he just doesn't have the ability to get there, then we need to say, all right, let's cut our losses, sell him to a team that wants him, and let's bring in a keeper that's worth it. Because I'll say, honestly, I hope Willie plays in the FA Cup final. I think Willie is a much better keeper. I think he tries more than Kepa does. I just think the experience that he has makes him a better keeper. Because Kepa just looks young, he looks afraid, and he's not good enough. So, with all that being said, that's about it for this whole podcast, talking about the season, and I am excited to see the FA Cup final. I do think, we have a chance going in. I think it's going to be a difficult matchup. I think Arsenal are on a bit of a high right now, but also they're very vulnerable in the back, just like we are, so I think it could be a fun, high-scoring game. But also I hope that, it's not. I hope that we just score and they don't, because that would be much more fun for me. But yeah, so going into the FA Cup final, I'm excitedly nervous. I guess I'll just kind of give my quick thoughts on who I think should play. Willie in goal. I think go with the back 3 again. Maybe go with Tomori instead of Rudiger. So, Azpilicueta, Zuma, Tomori, give him a chance. I don't know how he's been doing in training. If he's doing well, then definitely give him a chance. Of course, Alonso and James as your wing backs. I say Kovacic and Conte if Conte is fit in the midfield. And then go Pulisic, Giroud, Willian if Willian is fit. Because I know he got hurt before the game this past weekend. So that would be my ideal lineup. Maybe if Willian's not fit, maybe throw Mount up there. Maybe even go with Mount and Kovacic sitting in front of Conte, and then Pulisic and Giroud, kind of like a striker and false 9 and behind him type of thing. I don't know. I feel like you've got a few different options you could put out there. But the things I definitely don't want to see, I don't want to see Kepa in goal, and I don't want to see Barkley on the field. That's it. I don't want to see either of them on the field. If they are, I'll be very upset. So, but anyways, with all that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on the season, the players, the manager, all of it? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Chelsea reviews, and I'll see you guys at the final. Peace out.